Hey everybody, my name is Brett Bartholomew and you are listening to another episode of Oak Performance Radio. Enjoy the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Oak Performance Radio. I'm your host, Adam Lane. If you're new to the show, our goal here is to create some content, some fantastic content for athletes, parents, and coaches. We tell stories, have laughs, and go into everything that is the end game of athletic performance, helping athletes achieve their optimal performance and be the best they can possibly be. Enjoy the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Oak Performance Radio. I'm your host, Adam Lane. With me today from beautiful, sunny, hot, I'm assuming it's hot, Brett. I don't know if it is. I'm assuming hot Arizona coach, Brett Bartholomew. Brett, thanks for joining us, bud.
Hey, my pleasure. I wish I could say it's hot. You know, thankfully, it's, well, I don't wish I could say it's hot. We get 3.5 months of 100 plus. Now, from now until the end of May, it'll be a nice, cool 65 to 80 degrees almost every single day.
Oh,
That's why you live in Phoenix. You live in Phoenix, you deal with the summer, and after the summer, you don't turn on heat or air conditioning the rest of the year. You get spoiled.
see, that's not bad at all. That is not bad at all. Brett, here, let's just jump right into it. For the tens of people that listen to the show who might not know who you are and why you're such a big deal, quickly, just you give them who you are and why you're such a big deal.
Yeah, definitely not a big deal. I was a strength and conditioning coach for 15 to 20 years. Worked primarily with NFL athletes, Major League Baseball, United States Special Forces, and then combat sport athletes. So had the good fortune to work both in collegiate strength and conditioning for a while and then kind of a pseudo who's who of professional athletes. But the main thing I really liked out of that is the psychological aspect of really being able to get people that are worth 150, sometimes $200 million to have to listen to you and do things that they don't inherently want to do. So I've always been really big on psychology, understanding human nature, the human condition, how we all really build trust with one another and navigate conflict. So I wrote a book in 2017 called Conscious Coaching, and simply by the grace of God, I think that book took off and was a bestseller. At one point, we were out selling Tony Robbins and Ted Koppel. It's been translated into 6 languages. And then I'm working on another book now, which will be released in 2026. So my day job involves running a company called The Art of Coaching. And we focus on really on the intersection of leadership development, relationships, and entrepreneurship. So using psychosocial principles and communication to help people really be able to deal with the messy realities of leadership and life.
Gotcha. What was the draw to the whole psychology part? I mean, you're a strength coach. You lift weights and then you lift more weights and then you lift weights after that. Why that route? What attracted you to that?
Yeah, actually, I've never really viewed strength and conditioning about that. Coaching is fundamentally a social endeavor, right? Coaching by definition is a social endeavor between social beings and social environments. And so, you know, that this is one thing that I think a lot of coaches and even managers and leaders, I'm going to use the term interchangeably, get wrong. They think it's about a task or a feat. It's about human interaction. I mean, bottom line, if you can't communicate effectively, it's bound to make just about any situation worse. So as I detailed in my book, Conscious Coaching, I nearly lost my life at a young age, in part due to poor communication in a medical setting. And, you know, very much was treated as a one size fits all number. And so I had a very strong interest in understanding why would people who are extraordinarily educated and skilled treat somebody like that? Why do how many people have had bad experiences with a doctor who talks through them? How about a coach who didn't really connect with them? I mean, poor communication, fundamentally, it impacts every aspect of our life. So I felt like, well, what's a real way that we can impact that? Well, you got to know how people think. You got to know what they fear. You got to know what they seek in life. You got to know their pain points. And if you can't understand the psychology of a human being, most of all yourself, you're going to be really poor at influencing those people to navigate change, which is really what leadership is about, helping people navigate change amidst complexity and a lot of different types of conflict.
So I taught 7th grade math for 14 years, and I found it interesting. Not saying I was the greatest math teacher of all time, but I was pretty good, because when you have to slam fractions down the mouths of 12-year-olds, it's like selling a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves. Like, they do not want to buy. They are not interested. And progressively, it got harder and harder and harder as it went, just because parents, instead of being on your side, got more on their student side, who, you know, was less excited about actually teaching. But it was, I mean, everything that you said there in the way of, when I had a good relationship with these kids and I said, hey, could you get these 5 done for me, please? Okay. Like, because they didn't hate me as a person, like they would typically do them, even if they didn't like math, even if they didn't like fractions. It worked out really, really well. Transfer that to the coaching side of things is a similar thing. Like, you're asking kids, athletes, in which to do things often that they don't want to do, that are really, really hard. And that relationship deal is a big deal. I focused a lot of my stuff. There's a book called Teaching with Love and Logic. There's also Parenting with Love and Logic. And it just made so much sense to me. And it's interesting to see teachers or coaches or whoever who haven't like locked in that respect thing, that relationship thing, to see coaches yell at kids, to see kids yell back at coaches when there's not that. I mean, I was just talking to our volleyball director about one of our college kids, and they just had a blow up at practice, a Division I practice. They just had a blow up between senior and head college coach, and like in practice, like yelling, screaming at each other. And you're just like, what is going on here? This is a senior. They've been here for a while. Like, what is going on here? And I think it comes down to that relationship obviously was never built, and it's not there. And I don't know, kids have problems. I don't know where I'm going with this, Brett. I have no questions. I'm just rattling things out. But I think it's interesting because that's why I like your book so much, because it just freaking makes sense. Dare I say it's common sense, but I mean, obviously you had to write a book on it for people to realize it.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. One, to me, I would take everything you said is true, but I would take a counter approach of it's not really surprising in the sense that I don't know about you, and maybe you've had a different lived experience, but did you get a bunch of education on social and psychosocial dynamics when you became a coach?
I did not.
No. Did you get a bunch of education on influence tactics and why people engage in things like avoidance and withdrawal and ego defense mechanisms? Did you get any? Right. So fundamentally coaching is not taught that way. More than 285 coach development workshops, which is well more than more than 96% of coach development workshops teach absolutely nothing about that. I mean, maybe they'll teach something about like Bandura or self-determination theory, but they don't actually teach the job. And my time in strength and conditioning was interesting because it's one of the only jobs where people don't train for actually what they do. In law enforcement, they train for what they do. As a firefighter, they train for what they do. In strength and conditioning, you just have a bunch of people that lift weights.
Yeah.
That's part of what you teach, but what you do is interact and guide people and resolve conflict and persuade and all of those things and even manipulate in the positive sense of the term, because the number one definition of the term manipulate is to wield a tool skillfully. And that's what you're wielding, communication. And so to me, if coach development itself is broken, then we shouldn't expect there to be a lot of great self-aware coaches, especially because most people get into coaching simply because they like sports or they like lifting weights or, something like that. They don't actually get into it because they fundamentally like dealing with people. So I thought that was interesting. And then, yeah, I mean, you would think it was common sense in the context of my book that relationships matter a great deal. But I think what's tricky is a lot of books. The reason I wrote it is there was a lot of cheesy ass books out there about like chop wood, carry water, and they're going to figure out that you love them. And the old man in the woods gave the wisdom to the guy who turned a peanut into a whatever. And you're like, what the hell are we talking about? And it was just like, why is there nothing about different personality archetypes where nobody fits into one bucket, but we all know a skeptic. We all know a know-it-all. We all know a self-sabotager. We all know certain personality quirks and characteristics that reside in all of us. And to not have a book that tells you, hey, here are heuristics, not ironclad guides, but heuristics that can help you identify some of these folks and tendencies and then give you a little bit of a playbook for it. But I mean, the same is true for what my second book is going to be about. And it's just interesting because people, and it's also hard and it's messy, Adam, people like formulas. People like, I want to know that 6 times 4 is going to give me primarily strength adaptations. If it's at a certain, I want to know that if I use this motivational speech, it's going to get me the same outcome that Denzel Washington's team had. And people are anything if but predictable. And then finally, coaches themselves don't really like to integrate their opposite, kind of go into the Jungian principle of the shadow. Like all of us have a duality. And I think a lot of just coaches don't engage in great self-leadership. For example, right? You're a very, very easy to get along with, seemingly happy, ebullient guy. Like you're caring, you're thoughtful. But I mean, like any of us,
mom says. That's what she says.
there you go. Like any of us, I imagine that you have a monster or an inner voice in you, right? Like, and allow me to ask this. I don't know if anybody's asked that, but like, what is this like dark side that you have that maybe, and remember, it doesn't need to be bad or evil. A lot of people ascribe a religious connotation to that, which would be inappropriate. A dark side for some, let's say somebody grows up in a family where like creativity and showing their emotions is anathema. Do not show emotions. Do not this. Their suppressed shadow or dark side is that creative, emotional self, right? Another person's shadow or dark side might actually be a more assertive or aggressive self. So I don't mean dark as in evil. I mean something as in suppressed or a different part. What do you have that side to you, and how would you describe it?
I think I struggle at this point in my career we've had the gym for 12 and a half years now. And to look, I mean, you know this by owning your own business company and stuff like that. Like every month you go, through your P&L and things should be rainbows and sunshine, and they're not. And when they're not, like, I feel like I have to walk out, outside of this room and feel like I have my shit completely together. And there are times where like, I have no freaking clue what I'm doing. And I have to, that makes me feel like less of a strength coach, less of a person, less of a guy that actually should have his crap together. Even though there are times when I do, but there are also times when I don't. And that just, it was such a gamble. I don't say gamble. Maybe it's a gamble because I was teaching public education. I had a consistent paycheck. I had my master's degree. Like I was way over on the pay scale. And then we said, no, my wife's still teaching. Hey, Adam's going to go off and do this, this home for, start a gym. It'll be easy. They said, come on in. Everyone will come. And I think that the gym has brought out some of the worst in me. Never at the gym. It's always at home. It's usually in front of my wife. If not, it's me in front of the mirror. I don't know if does that click the box there?
No, I'm going to ask you the question. I'm going to ask you now. I can infer something. So I'm coaching you hard here. Like I absolutely know what you're saying, but I'm not going to let you get by with that. Like, so we're going to do it again. What is a part of you that you suppress? So you feel like if people knew it about you or you saw it, it would be deemed a little bit more like socially unacceptable, or like you'd feel like you're getting judged, right? It's this persona within you that you don't feel like you can show. So again, I have a client right now that I'm working through with our coaching service where, they're a massive people pleaser. They don't want to fire their staff, even though they know they need an entire. And so he's like, my dark side, he goes, I definitely have like a dark mat that is like as loving and caring and forgiving as I am on a normal day-to-day basis. I have this really pragmatic side of me that I shield and I don't let out enough because I'm scared that it could be perceived as cold-hearted, but I'm not going to allow you to use that one because, I had to give you that one. So you gotta give me something that, it's a different face you wear. The concept I'm describing makes sense. Yes.
It is. It's really hard to reflect on this.
Right. Take your time. It's worth doing because this is where real content comes from.
Yeah. Cause I too am not fantastic I've fired 2 coaches in 12 years and I should have fired more, and everybody else that we've had leave have left on their own accord. And I probably should have before I should have.
Okay. So let me try this, right? And we'll kind of tease it out. One thing I talk about in my next book, and I really shouldn't be talking about this out loud. So, it really is insider like information is, I think a lot of the problems that people are dealing with now is we live up to we're trying to live up to what I call the heroic blueprint. Think of what a lot of people, let me just, so I don't lead you down a path of confirmation bias. If I were to say, there's this heroic blueprint that I think societally we're told to live up to. What are some like leadership myths? And remember, leadership, coaching, managing, whatever, we're going to put those in the same bucket right now. What are some myths of like what leaders should be? A good leader, a good coach? What are some things that we hear a lot that they should be?
Yeah. Strong, tough, unwavering, never letting down, work again, work more, Nose to the grindstone.
Sustainable?
That would be nice.
No, is it sustainable?
No, it is not.
Is it realistic?
Not for me.
Do we even think that historically that's true, right? It's funny. We've heard a lot of stories about Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and people like that growing up. If you're in the United States, did you ever hear about how Abraham Lincoln during one point in the Civil War was bedridden with a depression and deep melancholy for more than 2 weeks?
I'm not a big historian. I would say no, I have not heard that, but I believe you.
Did you know that when you hear Winston Churchill, what do you think of?
Yeah, all those strong things I just listed out.
Right. Winston Churchill was occasionally or more often than not drinking an entire bottle of champagne before noon, dealt with what he called the black dog of depression in his own terms. You had Martin Luther King Jr., who, like, we're not told about this a lot, committed infidelity. The point is in the United States, we have a lot of this kind of heroic ideal. And we think that only hearing great parts of our leaders and those incredible people, no matter who that is, whether it's a singer or this and that makes them great. And in reality, it makes them terrifically unrelatable. Like, the best kinds of leaders and coaches are real people. Who amongst us hasn't sinned, right? Like, there's somebody that did this and that and this. And like, okay, so somebody, I guess Martin Luther King is just worthless because he was impure in his marriage. I guess like Abraham Lincoln was weak because he dealt with melancholy. I guess all these people are just not worth anything. And it's interesting because we're sold like great leaders don't quit. Does a lion ever quit chasing a gazelle if it feels like they may not catch? 100%, because otherwise sunk cost fallacy and they're going to wear themselves out. You need to know it's a strategic repositioning. So a lot of my book talks about, because of this heroic ideal, people don't actually truly lead authentically. They lead trying to mirror this ideal. They try to become something they're not. And then what that does is that just creates cognitive dissonance because, you know, they don't make the impact they want because they're fundamentally not leading like actual human beings. They don't relate to those that they lead. And it just becomes a big bullshit fest, frankly, you know? And so what I assert, and there's research to support this, and there's also just common sense to support this, is if people really understood, and again, I don't mean dark, there's no religious context here. If people understood and leveraged more of their dark side, their doubts, their demons, this part of them that they repressed, and they actually integrated that and showed themselves as more fundamentally human, they would effectively be better leaders. And not only that, be more socially agile. Because the idea is not to be your best self. What a bunch of bullshit that is. What is your best self? The idea is to be your whole self. Your whole self, because I don't know about you, but I coach flawed people. Do you coach flawed people?
Every day.
Right. And frankly, would you want to be perfect?
I would not.
No, there's a great book about that, right? Called A Brave New World, where everybody pops by Aldous Huxley, right? Everybody pops Soma and there's no conflict and there's no strife. And guess what else there isn't? Any innovation. None of it. And so, like, you know, fundamentally, I just think that people need to be more introspective and think like the best way, and this is a young quote or a take on it, is the best way to deal with the darkness of others. And in this case, he means the complexity of others and the conflict and the inherent ups and downs we're going to deal with when managing or leading other people. You need to know your own darkness, right? So I'll give you one last take of this. Like, for me, I hope you've been to one of our courses. I believe I'm professional. I believe it's clear that I try to help people. I'm definitely a darker shade of gray. There's some people that probably clutch pearls listening to this because I said a bad word. But you always know where you stand with me, and I'm very real, right? And my shadow would be like, I actually have to repress more of my assertiveness. Right. I'm very much like Logan, you know, and that like inside I would just like, I don't suffer fools well. And by fools, I mean emotionally immature people that aren't self-aware, people that don't take accountability, people that want to blame everybody else. I don't deal well with that. And so I have to hold a lot of that in, but I'm better now at selectively just letting that out and knowing how to unleash that demon when it's a situational fit. Right now, like my ex-wife at one point, right? Like we were talking and, you know, she came from a very repressed family. Like you don't share your emotions, very conflict avoidant, which created a lot of withdrawal, which created issues in the relationship because conflict was a bad thing to her. And so like things didn't get worked through. It's kind of like, let's go to bed and hope they're gone tomorrow. And they're not. Her shadow would have been being loving and vulnerable and opening up and being willing to cry and not trying to put on this facade of strength, right? So I've given you a lot of examples now. So I'll ask you one more time. What's an example of your shadow?
I think I lean much more to your wife's side of things. I mean, we grew up very Catholic. That was, I mean, not that we didn't have communication.
Shame and guilt.
Yeah, it really was. There was a lot of, I mean, I don't want to say those are the building blocks of Catholicism. But there's a little bit of that.
Why are you holding back? Yeah, why are you holding back?
Well, exactly. So yes, I think I lean to that side of, not being as assertive as I often need to, because I see that imperfection within myself. And then for me to judge you, who the hell am I? And then
but then that's just rationalizing and intellectualizing and kind of burying it down deeper. Right. And so I'll give you an example and tell me if you relate to this. Oh, and I'm making up names. A woman that I'm coaching, her name's Anita, and Anita works for a large corporation, and she feels like her team, which has been a really good team for a long time, has kind of gotten soft, entitled, kind of lazy, in the sense that they're still skilled, but they've kind of rested on their laurels. And she wants to get a metaphorical kick in the ass, but she's like, I can't. Our workplace has really gotten kind of soft around that. And, if I lead the way that I want to, I'm going to get in trouble. And I said, that's interesting. So tell me this, you repressing that shadow, so to speak, or that alt self, what does that lead you to do? Right? Because if you don't push your team, what do you think happens to the nature of conversations and innovation in there? What do you think happens just by and large?
Not much.
Right. No, you're not going to have much improvement, right? So, would you say that she's more or less likely to be enabling the same behavior that's driving her nuts by repressing this stuff?
Yes. Enabling,
right? So, but then when I suggest the whole dark side to her thing, she's like, but I couldn't do that. It just sounds so evil and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, Anita, listen, there's gradients to this. Okay. The most pure version of yourself is like, hey, I want you all to reclaim your power and your live truth and blah, 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 blah. And just take your time, work from home. And then the other part of you is like, get to work, do this. I go, let's have you're overcorrecting towards the light. Let's strategize and even role play dark Anita. Now what I want you to do is then we scale that back. Right. But let dark Anita out. Let's see what that's like. Let's try on that hat and then let's scale that back because there's a gradient. Right. And she still kind of struggled with it. So what I told her to do is I said, I want you to think of an alter ego, like literally an alter ego. And this comes from, a scientific study called the Batman effect, where they show kids that, when they're like, hey, what would Batman do? It tends to make kids more resilient because of a concept called psychological distancing. And so the whole idea is that we called her, it's just she made up some name, like Beyonce has Sasha Fierce and Eminem has Marshall Mather or Slim Shady and all these things. And, Kobe Bryant had Black Mamba and all that. So it creates distance and it sounds silly. But when you create distance and you're like, all right, this is my alter ego engaging in this, it allows you to shift your perspective, broaden your perspective, creates cognitive flexibility, and it lets you kind of off the hook a little bit of feeling like you, as Adam Lane, need to be perfect, her, as Anita made up name, being perfect. And instead, it's just like, I'm going to show a different version of myself. Does that track? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Do you find that concept helpful, useful, practical? Where do you find that?
It does. Well, no, I think all those things. I think that's one thing that I've actually been, decent at in the way of like when I coach and I'm pretty transparent when it comes to, hey guys, this is what we're looking to do. I know this is hard. I know this is tough. I tried this. I did and try to put myself in, and I'll just be very, very open. I screwed up last year. I made a comment to our volleyball kids. We coach 150 high school kids over a couple different sessions, and they just looked tired and like bags under eyes and stuff like that. I'm like, we're just talking sleep. Like, guys, we gotta sleep. We gotta get to bed. And I made a joke about, hey, raise your hand if you're taking 2 or more AP classes. And freaking all their hands went up. I'm like, okay, guys, can we? Gosh, I don't even remember the comment. Something along the lines of, hey, let's forget school for a little bit. Prioritize your sleep. And like the look on their face was like, Adam, you ass. Like, I work so hard to get the academic stuff that I'm doing. You're telling me not to do it and just go home and go, like, what are you doing? And literally I had to come back the next day and apologize because I sat on it. I'm like, I'm a jerk. I am a complete, I just want them to, get a, something close to 6.5 hours of sleep instead of 4 hours of sleep. I didn't mean to come off as a jerk. And so I don't know. I don't know if this tracks the same way you're going with it, but that's where my mind went, where I think if a coach comes off as, I don't know, the dead opposite of me, always all knowing and I think that can create lots of issues and lack of trust. And
why do you think so many people follow the kind of heroic ideal, the heroic blueprint? Why do you think that's ingrained? And just pontificate, right? Why do you think that? What do you think's behind a lot of that? This idea that we're supposed to be this and instead of engaging with kind of a normal part of ourselves, which is like, we all have a dark side. Would you disagree with that?
No, I would not.
Right. And like, how many movies do you see? Just one more take. How many movies do you see where, like, let's call the hero or the protagonist or whatever? How many movies do you see where, like, right off the bat, they have what it takes to beat the villain?
Yeah.
What does it usually take in terms of their transformation? What do they usually have to integrate, or what do they usually have to do to become the version of themselves they need to beat the villain?
Oh gosh. Yeah. Some type of learning process in which
but do they go more towards purity and morality in the sense of the movie, or do they learn how to break some rules and get past some old facades?
Yes, probably more the latter.
Right. Like, so you have The Dark Knight, right? Where Batman realizes to stop Heath Ledger's Joker, that he has to become an anti-hero fundamentally, right? He can't be here. Even in the more modern Superman, right? Yeah, man, not super relatable character, and then eventually realizes that there is shades of gray. And that's really what this comes down to, is this concept of moral ambiguity. People believe that you can be completely moral and just and pure and perfect and good, and that input equals a good output, and it just doesn't, right? And immoral doesn't mean like evil and what have. That's the thing, is we're an absolutist society, especially in coaching and leadership. So I'll tell you a quick story, if I may. Can I?
You go nuts.
This is a great example, and just that it really gets people unnerved. As a matter of fact, my publisher told me I couldn't put it in the book because they said people would quit reading, which I find tremendously troubling. So this is a true story. This is a true story that I'm going to be paraphrasing. Okay.
That is not in the book.
Well, I'm going to get it in the book. I have to figure it out. So a woman named Susan McKinnon, everybody can look her up, world-renowned surgeon, one of the top, if not the top. I mean, obviously there's subjectivity there, neurosurgeons in the world. And remember, I'm paraphrasing for the sake of time, essentially working on a patient that had a severe nerve entrapment that nobody else could figure out. And Dr. McKinnon was in the middle of surgery. And I'm dealing with some sinus stuff, and essentially had to call timeout. She couldn't trace the nerve. And so what she did is she had her assistant go and take some pictures of this manual in her office. So the assistant comes back, puts them on the surgery screen. I'm not sure of the term for it. And Dr. McKinnon's able to trace the nerve, and she's able to save the person's leg, and voila. Great, right? Great story. Heroic, amazing. Susan McKinnon, amazing. Well, what if I told you that the resource that Dr. McKinnon had to consult from belonged to the chief surgeon of Hitler's Third Reich? It is known as Pernkopf's Atlas. It is something many surgeons know about, but do not openly speak about. And it is, despite its absolutely awful demonic history, it to this day is still the most accurate topographical atlas of human anatomy that exists. Now, it is so because anatomy and physiology is by and large considered a 19th century medicine now. So they don't go back and, redo a bunch of texts necessarily in the same way, but mainly because of the inappropriate means in which they procured their subjects. And the fact that they did a lot of war crimes, they were able to do things when dissecting the bodies that the medical community would no longer do. And it just so happens that surgeon, again, despite being a part of a despicable regime, an absolutely despicable regime that committed atrocious human rights violations, he happened to be an incredible doctor. and they happen to have amazing artists. And so then becomes the fundamental question. Can something born of pure evil, even if we were to go down the moral ambiguity rabbit hole, still be used to do good? And then does the use of that thing, if so, or if not, depending on where people stand on it, what does that make Susan McKinnon? I'm not going to say the rest. I'm going to get your take.
I mean, I personally don't think I have an issue with it. I mean, that.
And by and large, the medical community, I mean, she got criticism for sure. I mean, you can't do anything in this world without getting criticism. But by and large, the medical community said, hey, as long as when it's used and if it's used, its background is acknowledged, it's not kept secret, what have you, but then you can use it. But one of the, I don't know, the chief, whoever Eye of Sauron would be of the medical community was essentially listen, I'm Jewish, and in the Jewish faith, the highest sin is basically if you can save a life and you don't, there's nothing worse than that. So for us, you save the life, you do it. And then it's just pragmatic, right? But this is the same idea, although that's a very dramatic example, but that's an example of you don't get pure, unfiltered, perfect scenarios in life. You make the best of what you got. And that's why I have always liked anti-heroes more than heroes. Anti-heroes are flawed, but they're fastidious. They're pragmatic, but they're purposeful, right? They have this sense, and it's how I'm going to teach my kid to grow up. I'm just going to be buddy, the world's not fair. And sometimes you're going to have to break some rules. My job as your dad is to teach you what rules to break. And there's no manual to this, and people are going to get mad at you, and you're going to try to do the right thing, and people are still going to get frustrated. I mean, I wrote a best-selling book at 29, and there was 5% of the strength and conditioning community that called me a sellout and told me I was awful. One person called me a racist because of our use of archetypes, which in the book we describe are just nothing more than a mental model. And I'm like, how is me saying that skeptics and self-sabotagers and all this exists in the world, and we're all representative of those people to a degree? How is that racist? And then you just realize, wow, just people are very unhappy. So that's what I think leaders need to do in terms of being able to be more effective universally. And it doesn't matter whether you want to be a good teammate or anything, because leadership, I don't know how you view it. For me, leadership is not about one person. Leadership is about how everybody involved in a process, right? Leadership is a process. It is not about a person, because all it takes is one enigmatic follower for all of leadership to fail if it's about one person. And we know even from the presidency, if one person's got totalitarian rule, come on. And so leadership is a process, and it fundamentally fails if people are not introspective, don't hold themselves accountable, don't adapt, and don't communicate well. I blacked out.
No, I did too. That was fantastic. So if I'm where my mind's going right now is that we have a coaches meeting this weekend. Our staff, all the volleyball coaching staff, I mean, we're talking 85 coaches are going to be, sitting down, going through 3 hours of training, some of it just paperworkish stuff, but some of it, really good, whatever. Hey, this is how we want to attack certain things and throughout the year and blah, blah, blah. But there won't be a ton of this is how you coach. I have a buddy who's an athletic director who gets frustrated because they don't put resources into their coaches. His line is something: the coach within the high school is the most influential person with absolutely zero training in actually what they're doing. At least teachers go to school for teaching. Nobody actually goes to school for coaching outside of there's that one coaching 201 class that's just an elective that somebody took that you didn't actually learn anything out of. But most of our coaches are, very, very part-time, or I'm thinking the volleyball people, very part-time, people who have played the sport before. I get, and this can go for literally any sport. But they're busy. They're parents. They're working. They're doing all these things. If just knowing what you know and diving down the rabbit holes that you've dove down, what might be the best? What's your recommendation for a coach starting a sports season? Here within the next couple of weeks, club season that starts in December. What do you think coaches are missing? What do you think they need to really? On behalf of everyone, what do we need to get better at?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm incredibly biased. You got to keep in mind my entire life is predicated on starting a business that's focused on teaching coaches social agility, knowing how to read people, understand people, resolve conflict, adapt, be able to understand more about communication styles, preferences, how to deal with people and the messy realities of it. Right. But again, I'm biased, but there's no backup, right? Like I'm not a trust fund baby. My entire business is built off what I think people are. And we've been fortunate enough to work with companies like Apple and Microsoft and, the Houston Texans and organizations across things. So we're not alone. But coaches need to quit going to these quote unquote workshops that are nothing more than trust falls and motivational phrasing and let me learn different plays and training techniques nonstop. And they need to come actually practice scenarios like you did in real time, where they're going up against different personalities and conflicts. And you're actually going through what we call social scrimmaging, because I don't know many coaches that have it all figured out. And I mean, this is also something that Nick Saban and Bill Belichick openly talk about, like the fundamental aspects of getting people to buy in and relationships. But again, you have to understand most people aren't going to do that because it's uncomfortable. And like, if you teach me a new drill or a new training technique or a new this, I don't take that as a personal affront or an attack to my self-image. But a lot of people, if you're like, hey, you approach that conversation with Jacob this way, try that again and lob this at him or try to use this technique, then, people get, for some reason, very up and on. Well, not, our clients don't, but a lot of people do because I'm already good enough at communication. You're like, what the hell does good enough at communication mean? And then you realize, oh, wait a minute. Most people don't know what that means. They think like they bartended for 18 years and they know how to talk to people. And they think that this, so like we had to start calling it like conflict resolution and power dynamics because people just don't get that. Like if I have a coach is like, how do I get through to this kid? And now, okay, well, what have you done so far? Most of them just, they tried to inspire them or they tried to get them in a good mood or they try to give them facts. This is the facts, Jimmy. This is what you need. And I hate to tell you, inspirational tactics and rationality and appealing to rationality, those are two of more than 25 different influence techniques you can use. And then my other favorite excuse is when people are like, well, I'm never going to remember all this in the heat of the moment. And so I just don't know. I'm like, dude, tell me another way to say that you're like closed-minded. Like when you come and learn something, much like your athletes, for the first time, you're going to go through conscious incompetence, right? And it doesn't become second nature or anything like that, let alone just reflexive until you've trained it and trained it and trained it and trained it. So we've got to make communication sexy again. And we've got to help people understand that it's not, hey, Jimmy, how are you today? I'd really like to talk to you about your feelings. It's knowing it's social agility. It's knowing, okay, I'm not using the right influence tactic, or this isn't working with Jimmy. So who are the 5 people that Jimmy's most closely influenced by? Let me go try to talk to them so I can use indirect. People are just clueless. They want what they want the way that they want it. And if they don't want it, then that other person's rude and that other person's not committed. And that's lazy. It's intellectually lazy, but that's why it's not popular. People don't want to, certain people. And I would say this, here's maybe a challenge and something to poke. Most of our clients are people that are like, dude, I've already been through that phase in my career where I thought training or new plays or new this or that was the end all be all. Like I've now learned and we have higher level leadership people that come to our events, and so there's great research by Gary Uckel from the University of Albany that states very clearly the higher levels of leadership you get to, the more it is about interpersonal problem solving. The more it's about those issues. Even if you're in the C-suite and you're getting picked to be like the CEO, or you're trying to get a coaching job in the NFL or Major League Baseball or this great high school district or whatever, when you're standing amongst 20 other coaches who all have great plays or great technical prowess and whatever, what sets you apart exactly? New levels, new devils. So you need to get more introspective. You need to write out, here are my 3 biggest weaknesses as a coach. I can tend to lead on inspirational appeals too much. I often use cliches. I rush the process. I'm not sitting each athlete down, making the time to sit each athlete down, understanding their pains, wants, needs, fears, and reading in between the lines. Or how about this? I'm not getting coaching myself. you need to think everybody should create a personality kind of spreadsheet that says, okay, and I did this with more than 75 athletes. Where are they from? What are their hobbies? Do they have brothers? You need to just create a personality profile. And if people want tips on this, they can go to getfieldguide.com, or they can, better yet, just go to artofcoaching.com and go to free resources. We have so many free resources on this. So many free resources. We have things that people can use to handle just about anything. And if we don't, we have free reading lists and all kinds of stuff for folks.
I think I'm trying to think, because you said, I'm trying to remember seeing coaches ask other coaches for their feedback on a situation that happened. And I started coaching kids in 2002, so 2 years now. And I think I can count on one hand the amount of times that I've seen people actually reach out and get feedback. And it's more like, oh, these kids, they're not getting it.
They don't.
What the heck? Back in the day, And
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's hard for if we just don't know to ask for help, or if we're too embarrassed.
It's not a norm. It's a vulnerability thing. Again, it's not taught. It's not normalized. People go to clinics and it's normalized. Okay, I'm going to show you how to clean. I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to show you how to do that. And they love it because they like working out. And I get it. I like that too. But that's not the job. You got to do the job. And so, I think, I don't know about you. Again, you came to an apprenticeship. I think it was almost immediately post COVID. So that was a smaller one. But I love watching people get feedback, and almost all of our feedback from the event is to have the opportunity to have people that I know aren't coming for my job, or they're putting themselves out there the same way that I am, just to give me a different perspective. Cause man, I don't know how many of your listeners have, how long they've been coaching or whatever, but to me, not getting any feedback is worse than bad feedback. Everybody knows what it's like to not get any feedback. And I would even say, just as a creative, somebody I have a book and a podcast and all that. So I get criticism every day. I remember, just as a personal joke to lighten the mood a little bit. 1 second, let me get a drink. Oh, my wife and I were in Greece. It was a small little hotel gym, and we had worked out in it a bunch. We were kind of ready to mix it up, and there was nowhere to do. I wanted to do farmers carries and a finisher, right? And I was like, there's nowhere to move in this thing. It's a matchbox. I'm like, oh, there's a treadmill. I go, hey, I'm just going to pick up these 30-pound weights. Can you hit start and stop? I'm just going to go for 45 seconds. And then, I'm going to do kind of 10 push-ups, 10 inverted rows, rinse and repeat kind of thing. And so we put it on YouTube with the comment underneath, hey, this was a hotel gym workout. Here's the deal. My wife hit start and stop. Don't try this at home. If you're wondering what weight to use, that's relative. Again, this was a workout just for fun. It's not me telling you should. Oh my God. It's got so many views. It's ridiculous. And then people are like, you're an idiot. Who's even hitting on and off? And I go, well, who do you think's holding the camera, Jimmy? Read that. So my point is you're going to get criticized regardless. And that's where that you're doing something right. If my next book will come out, and just by the title, which I'm not going to share here, no offense to you, I'm just legally not able to, it comes out in 2026. And just by the title of it, I'm very spiritual. I believe in God. I pray every night. My son says we say the Lord's Prayer, but I'm talking about hyper religious people, just by the name of it, will write reviews that are and they won't even read it. You know what I mean? They won't read it. And then other people that just don't like the fact that I have a beard will tell me I suck, or somebody will be like, you didn't go through Carl Jung's entire 132-year history. People are just mad and angry and frustrated because they don't know how to deal with their emotions. So feedback is amazing. It's amazing. And you want to be told there's room to improve. You want to be told you sucked on that one. Because that's people telling you I care enough, in the right situation. At our events, we say that flat out. Hey, everybody is here to straight up help you. If somebody says, do it again, you're full of it. That's a gift. That's a gift. Otherwise, what are we doing here? How much money have you ever wasted at bad clinics? I wasted so much money at bad clinics because people are just trying to be nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm amazed too, where, again, I've been doing this for a while. I feel like I really enjoy asking, especially my coaches that we know insanely well. I'll give some motivational speech of something like, really, guys, this is what we're looking to do. This is where we're and to ask their opinion of the feedback. One, I appreciate their feedback. Two, I feel like they feel so empowered. Like, oh, Adam actually cares about, what I think. Hey, my boss wants my opinion on this. And it just, I think it empowers them, not only the kids that are in front of you, which is obviously important, but like also the staff and people adjacent to you and whatnot. So I don't know where I'm going with that, but
well, I think what you're saying, if I hear you correctly, is just once again, criticism, imperfection, the process of improvement, these conflicting emotions. It's good. It's healthy. It's what we deal with. It's about being human. And that's a great thing to teach kids. Like, it's great to be like, hey, I'm nervous today. I know you guys got a big match. I'm nervous too. But you know what I've learned about myself? I'm nervous when I care a lot, and I care about you. I care about the process. And so, I think it's important that we all acknowledge how valuable it is to be nervous and that it's not a weakness. And I just want you to acknowledge it and channel it, because that's a big part of acceptance and commitment therapy is, when I became a father, I thought over and over again, oh my God, I thought all these ways my kid is going to die. I'm going to trip and he's going to go down the stairs and I'm going to do this and I'm going to forget that. And I used to think something was wrong with me because my mind would go to all these awful places. And then you realize, no, your brain's got a negativity bias. That's your brain's job, is to kind of freak you out because, all it used to take was one bad move and we're dead, back when it was the savannah. And what you need to do, a big part of acceptance and commitment therapy, is just realize these thoughts are tourists. Acknowledge them, say, wow, that's kind of a messed up thought, but it's normal. Next, you know what I mean? Wow, that was kind of a weird urge. Next, but don't suppress them. I remember one time, my ex-wife had kind of like, our son had a dream. And it was a silly dream. I won't get into it here, but it's a totally normal thing for a little kid to think about when you watch, like, it was like Magic School Bus and, honey, like it was like a lot of like, he's like, oh, I shrunk down and I did this. And it was something kind of naughty. And he has no idea what he's talking about. He's 4. You know what I mean? And I remember my wife was like, hey buddy, well, no, we don't do that. And we don't talk about that. And I'm like, and again, no, like that's how she was brought up. There was a lot of shame and guilt of it. And I go, no, don't do that to him. He has no idea what any of that stuff means. We need to have a constructive conversation about just what dreams are and all that. And like, that can be, and it's the same thing too, of like my only other soapbox, man, if I didn't do what I did, I think I would be like a couples therapist or a sex therapist. Because again, this goes into human communication as well. Growing up in Nebraska, Nebraska of all places, and going to school at Kansas State, we had great sex education. And you realize, like, the Romans and the Greeks, you saw statues of the human body and you weren't like, oh, nudity, oh God. And in today's world, it's like we're almost back to a Puritan society where if you see an ankle, it's like, what are we going to do? So here's where I'm going with that. How do we expect to have functioning adults, let alone great leaders and adaptable humans, if we're not having conversations about, communication and feelings and emotions and how to manage our money and sexuality and the body and our thoughts and our feelings? It seems pretty dysfunctional to me, and so I guess this heroic ideal must be worth it. I don't get it. So that's what I think. Like, fundamentally, the irony is you don't need to be a hero or your best self or any of that other BS to be a better leader, better teammate, better athlete, better husband, better wife, whatever. You need to be fundamentally human, and you need to express yourself and not hide things.
Do you think we all have a warped sense of everything that you're saying there because of everything social media, and you always see the best sides of everyone on said social media? So now in your own, now you're feeling this pressure, and to ask for someone's help would be the worst thing in the world. To have that communication be the worst thing in the world because you're trying to come off as this all-knowing, amazing stoic leader that has their crap together completely. Like we talked about, 45 minutes ago.
Yeah, it's just modeling. It's social. It's social. It's social learning, but it's also, this was here before social media, right? That's an easy scapegoat. It's all part of like self-discrepancy theory. We have our actual self, our ideal self, and then, like the ought self. We have who we think society wants us to be. We have who we feel like we need to be. And then we have who we really are. And that chasm between that is keeping us in perpetual I can't use the word I'd want to use. Perpetual, man, you'd be proud of it. I edited myself quick there. A perpetual like stagnation or just mental mess. See, sometimes it's just better to use the word, but I won't. I know if you need an unedited version, come to my show. But the other thing also too is just, man, like it's so much more refreshing and freeing to just be who you are. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm a role model to people. I don't try to be. I'm an imperfect, flawed human. I'm proud of that. That doesn't mean I rest on my laurels. I have just the right amount of self-hate because I teach communication and all this. I have very high expectations on myself, but I also just know when I'm like, all right, cut the shit and move on with it. And writing a book does that too. Like I haven't been able to work on my book in the last 2 months just because of life stuff, but I kind of just reached a point where I'm still like, all right, this is gonna be really good. But I was trying to like at one point in time, make it some masterpiece. And I can't. You only get 200 pages with a large publisher. They make you rewrite it. Like I'm on my 4th rewrite. And what I learned is you can spend your like waking hours on one passage and then they tell you to cut it anyway. And there's a lot of things that I wish I could take from these podcasts. Hopefully you'll send me a transcript, but there's a lot of things that you can take from these podcasts. So you're like, oh, where can I put this in the book? And you're like, you can't, you can't do it all, man. You can't do it all and you don't need to. And we need to start being very, very, very real with our kids about those things. Like we need to be very real with them. And I think more kids need to be anti-heroes. I think more people need to be anti-heroes. Life is complex. And where there's complexity, there's conflict. And that's why anti-heroes are a byproduct of like emergence. And so is many of the things in nature. And so, the kind of like siren call of a lot of this is like, you need to become the most adaptable version of yourself. And that's really hard to do if you run from conflict and try to be perfect.
Brett, I want to be cognizant of your time too. I really, really appreciate it. If you were to give one, because again, going into this club volleyball season, parents are a big group of influence that takes kids to and from and blah, blah, blah. I know your kid's only 4, but tomorrow they'll be 14, just like that. And if you're trying to help, most of our parents have the best intentions for their kids. They want their kids to enjoy sport, really milk everything that they can out of whatever fill in the blank sport. If you're trying to help guide your kid, not completely hands off, not completely hands on. We see too many parents that are way too involved. What's one thing that goes through your head as a parent, just trying to help your kid enjoy the sport and reap all the benefit that being in a team sport is?
My advice to kids or parents talking to their kids?
Parents talking to their kids.
Yeah. Kids is such a wide range of term. Do you want to give me a certain age?
Go mostly high school. Let's run with that.
Yeah, all you have to do is look at the dropout rates of kids in sports. It's absurd. Right? So it's somewhere between, you don't want to be a participation like trophy parent, right? But you also shouldn't be a sycophant. Like I'm a parent, and I'm going to tell my kid, like, first of all, do the sports that you like. You're not going to know what you like until you've tried a lot of them, which is why we get them involved. But like, man, they just got to enjoy the process and realize like, I had these ideas. I was going to be a pro baseball player and this and that. Like, after training pro baseball players, I can tell you that life would have sucked. I would not have wanted that life. Like I wouldn't, and at one point in time I interviewed to be the director of performance for the New York Mets. And I was like, even during that interview, I was sitting here thinking, would I want this life? 162 games or 180, God knows what it is now. And, I think the main thing is just like, do you want these kids to have healthy relationships with physical activity and competition and all that stuff later on? If it is, you need to meet them where they're at. If they want to quit a certain sport and try something new, hear them out, understand their thought process, seek to understand. If they're, it just depends, right? Like I need to know what conversation, like I'll maybe just consolidate it like this. I have a 4-year-old right now. It's buddy, try your best and go above and beyond at least 3 times. I don't need him to go above and beyond and everything. That's psychotic. The kid doesn't even know what that means, and then that's pressure and all that. And so he's like, what's above and beyond? And I'm like, well, if the coach tells you to run super fast. If you're going to do this, do that. Like, so find 3 times where you can exercise your superpower and you just go boom, and he loves that. It's sustainable. It's this. Nobody can give 110% all the time. So maybe that's a long-winded way of saying be more realistic in your messaging. If you're telling your kids, oh, give it all you got, do this, you need to go all out, you need to honor your commitments, and your kid's like a 3-sport athlete who never just gets to be bored and play a video game and whatever, that's not okay. And this is a fundamentally American thing in some ways. Obviously China's like this to a degree as well, but in countries, I remember going to speak in Ireland, and I was just like, the funny thing about you Americans, if you don't make it in pro sport, you guys are done playing. We still have amateur leagues, we have fun, and it's just crazy. It's crazy what people do. They put so much pressure. And there's all you have to do is read the research. There's benefits. Sorry, my microphone's falling down, so I'm going to do this. There's benefits to people being bored. There's benefits to people just doing less. But in the United States, busyness and achievement are status symbols. And they're really just masquerade. It's masquerading for unhappiness and a deep sense of inadequacy.
Brett, in this riveting podcast here, is there anything that you wish I would have asked you that I didn't?
Yes, but none of it's appropriate. And I still don't know what the hell your dark side is. So you need to get back to me on that in addition to giving me the transcript. You're hiding and it's not okay. You need to uncover the truth.
Oh, I think it was similar to your wife's, but I don't want to, I got to have more than that.
Yeah. You can't just be like, I'm your wife. I'm just like,
that's only a little bit weird. Best movie of all time.
The Dark Knight or
Really?
The Hurricane. Yeah, well, that depends if you're somebody that actually understands what it's about. The Dark Knight is not a superhero movie. It's about game theory, and it's about having to make difficult choices. The Dark Knight is fundamentally about the fact that character is revealed by the choices we make under pressure. And what are you willing to do to live up to your so-called ideals? You know what? I'll say Logan, I thought was amazing too. Or The Hurricane by Denzel Washington. I mean, it's realistically, and I love you and I'm giving you a hard time. It's a dumb question because it's contextual. So one of my favorite movies of all time is The Hurricane by Denzel Washington. And I'm not going to tell you what it's about. You just need to go watch it. But I love movies about duality and people having to, the Hurricane, I saw it 14 years old and I said, what the hell am I doing with my life?
I feel like I saw it, but I feel like I saw it. Yeah, 20 some odd years ago.
Why? What's your answer? Happy Gilmore?
No, well,
it's coming. Happy Gilmore 2 is coming.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's being shot right now.
I'm holding my breath now.
Best musician of all time, Eminem, hands down. And I listen to everything from Miles Davis to Frank Sinatra to...
See, I remember that. You're much more on top of that than I am. I was just a 90s grunge fan, and that was...
9 Inch Nails.
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, a little bit. More of the Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, a little Rage Against the Machine.
What about Smashing Pumpkins where it's a... I was just like that. Somebody karaoke'd that song the other day. I saw somebody, you know what I'm talking about? The one where it's just... All right, listen, I have a date to demolish one of my old college friends in NCAA 2025. That was something that I did to be more productive. You didn't ask me this. If you were to say, what's a counterintuitive piece of advice that you've used to be more productive, given that you own a business or trying to finish your doctorate? I had to put the doctorate on hold once I started my book and all these things. It is my neighbor and my best friend, Matt Morrison. Matt's 50, works for Lockheed Martin. Got me back into playing video games, which I hadn't played since high school. I thought it was a tremendous waste of time. And then I read, I remember this guy, he's a Nobel Prize winner, Amos Tversky, he's long dead now, said people will waste years by not being willing to waste hours. Also like Elon Musk, people like that are big advocates of it. When you're constantly intaking and productive and your brain never gets a chance to work. So I have very clear cut parts of the day where whether it's a hot shower, whether it's a workout or whether it's a quick video game, I have to have a way to, I've cut that, right? I'm moving on to something else. So waste more time, quit listening to the productivity gurus that again is just like, that comes from a place of fear. I'm not productive. I'm not going to get this done. I'm not good enough. Josie's going to outpace me at work. Billy's going to make the travel team and I'm not. You're like, you're all going to be fine. You're going to be fine.
Have some faith.
Have some faith. And then also, like, if doing something that's going and watching a movie or playing a video game or doing whatever, I don't know, engaging in watercolors is, something where you're like, I'm going to lose because I did this. Chances are you didn't do a lot of other things right. You know what I mean? Like, success is not predicated on one thing like that. That's garbage. And you're talking to somebody that during the course of this show, right? I'm balancing being a father, running a business, and writing a book while going through a divorce. And like, that stuff is supremely difficult. And you still have, I had a friend that's like, you seem kind of, you're handling this well. And I'm like, well, listen, man, when you go through a lot of conflict in life and you study these things, like, I know myself, and I fundamentally am just like, okay, when a certain amount of stress or a certain kind of red light-o-meter goes on, I have options for that now. In the past, I didn't. Yeah. In the past, I would just put my head down and bulldoze through everything. And I would use that adversity as fuel. Yeah. Now you have to be selective about that. Everything cannot be ramped up to the nth degree. You won't sustain it. Yeah. For those of you that are interested in a course on burnout and kind of managing career stress and all that, sorry, shameless plug. Yeah, no, do it, man. Go to valuedcourse.com. It was made when I was a strength coach, but the principles are completely transferable, right? We talk about burnout. We talk about transitions from getting the job, navigating stuff within the job, leaving the job. So just like you can read a book by a chef about leadership, or somebody in the military, and you don't have to be in the military. You don't have to be a chef. All those principles. That's valuedcourse.com. It's one of my best pieces of work that I don't think we advertise enough to this day. Yeah. I was going to say, I've not heard of that. Man, if you were to say what is the best body of work you think you've ever put out and is supremely underappreciated, and again, I hate 99% of things that I do, I would say that is hands down. And the strength, the NSCA said they wouldn't give that one CEUs because they didn't view it to be important to strength coaches. But strength and conditioning is one of the highest rates of burnout of any field. But valuedcourse.com, that cost me $35,000 to make. And the entire time I was presenting it, I had a throat ulcer. I had literally an open wound in the back of my throat. Oh, yeah. But I was drinking tea like a mug. Look it up. It's a good one. It's, I just think that I wish there was something for me when I was going through periods of burnout or dark seasons, or if anybody's listening and you're like, I feel stuck in my career and I love it, but I don't know what to do. And how, like, when do I know if to quit or how to quit? It's all that kind of stuff. If you don't have any kind of financial background too, and maybe you're not paid super well. My father, who was a stockbroker for 45 years, gives financial like kind of tips in 101. And he grew up poor without a father. So that was a pretty cool thing. Like, we got to do that together. And that was a really meaningful thing for me. Yeah. That's all I got, man. But the NSCA, man, come on, you guys. Jeez. Oh, they want all the good. And when they said that, then like 5 years later, they put out their own course. And I'm like, I see what you did there. See, now my last piece, and this is just to leave your listeners scratching their heads. I don't know how many of your listeners are older, but look up the transatlantic accent, or how people talked in the 1920s. If you and I were still in the 1920s, we'd be talking like this, see, and you'd be asking me questions like this. Ask yourself what happened to that accent. How come you don't come across people talking like this anymore, right? When you watch the Yankees, they're not saying, oh my God, he just hit a home run, right? You don't hear people in the movies saying, well, you're a swell fella. Go ahead and look up what happened to that accent. Get at your boy. I'm very curious. I have no idea. I can't wait to hear. You got to text me your answer. I don't even have a guess right now. Stay curious, my friends. There we go. Brett, I really appreciate your time. People want to reach out. I know you gave out the other things. They want to find you more. Learn more. Where else? Artofcoaching.com. Art of Coaching. Not the art of coaching, just artofcoaching.com. And if you'd like a copy of my first book, Conscious Coaching, a portion of proceeds go to the Alzheimer's Association and Leukemia Lymphoma Foundation. You can find it at Amazon worldwide, as well as Audible. Amazon, Audible, artofcoaching.com. So my name is Brett Bartholomew, and you've listened to another episode of Oak Performance Radio. I hope you enjoyed the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for listening to another episode of Oak Performance Radio. Don't forget to check us out on the social at Oak Performance and online at www.oakstrength.com/Oak Performance. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.